Captain stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance and stared at the empty space ahead. The stars looked the same as they always did in this part of the galaxy, distant, cold, and uncaring. His ship was small compared to the massive vessels that belonged to the other species in the Galactic Coalition. Some days, he wondered if anyone even remembered they were out here. "Another patrol route complete, Captain," said from the navigation station. She was young, only 26, but she could plot a course through an asteroid field blindfolded. "Nothing to report, again." Nodded. It had been 3 weeks since they had seen anything interesting. The Coalition had assigned them to the outer rim, the edge of known space where nothing ever happened. Other species got the important jobs, protecting core worlds, escorting diplomatic vessels, hunting pirates. Humans got to watch empty space and file reports that nobody read. "Run the system check," said, "then we can." The communications panel lit up, a distress signal. His fingers flew across her console, pulling up the information. "It's from Mining Colony 7 Alpha," she said. "They're under attack. Some kind of system failure and life support is failing." Felt his heart rate increase. Finally, something to do. Set course immediately, maximum speed. In the engine room below, heard the order and grinned. The engineer was 32 and had been working on ships since he was 16. He knew the Defiance better than anyone alive. His hands moved across the controls, pushing the reactor to its limits. The ship jumped forward, racing toward the distress signal. "ETA 20 minutes, reported." Opened the ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the captain. We have a rescue operation. Medical team, prepare for possible casualties. Security, stand by for emergency evacuation procedures." In the medical bay, was already pulling out supplies. She had been a doctor for 8 years before joining the Coalition fleet. She had seen everything from combat wounds to rare alien diseases. But out here on the rim, her skills were wasted on treating the occasional headache or sprained ankle. Today might be different. The Defiance was still 10 minutes out when another ship appeared on their sensors. It was massive, covered in elegant curves and glowing with soft blue light. A Velar command cruiser. "They're hailing us," said. The screen flickered to life. A Velar commander appeared, his large eyes reflecting light like mirrors. The Velar were one of the oldest species in the Coalition, and they never let anyone forget it. "Human vessel," the Velar said, his voice smooth and condescending. "We will handle this rescue. Return to your patrol route." Kept his face neutral. "With respect, Commander, we responded to the distress call first. We're already committed to." "You are humans," the Velar interrupted. "You have been part of the Coalition for barely 80 years. We have been saving lives for 12,000. Stand down." The connection cut off. Watched as the Velar cruiser moved ahead of them, arriving at the mining colony first. "Orders, Captain?" asked quietly. "We hold position," said, though it made his stomach burn. "But keep our rescue teams ready, just in case." They waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. The Velar cruiser sat next to the mining colony, but nothing was happening. His voice came over the comm. "Captain, I'm picking up increased emergency signals from the colony. Whatever the Velar are doing, it's not working." Made his decision. "Take us in. I need everything you can give me. Get your team to the airlock." The Defiance moved forward. The Velar cruiser immediately hailed them again. "Human vessel, we ordered you to." "The colonists are dying," said. "If you have it under control, then you won't mind us assisting." He cut the connection before the Velar could respond. Sometimes it was easier to apologize later than ask permission now. Brought the ship in close, matching the colony's slow rotation. It was delicate work. One wrong move and they could damage the colony's hull even more. But hands were steady. "Docking clamps engaged," she reported. "We're locked in." Grabbed his helmet and headed for the airlock. And her medical team were already there, along with his security squad. They sealed their suits and opened the airlock. The colony was a mess. Smoke filled the corridors and the lights were flickering. Counted 23 colonists huddled in the main chamber, most of them coughing from the smoke. They were a reptilian species with tough scales and multiple arms. "Life support is offline," one of the colonists said. "We tried to fix it, but the main reactor is damaged. In 1 hour we'll run out of air." Immediately started treating the injured while organized the evacuation. Looked at the reactor problem. He wasn't an engineer, but he had spent enough time around to know this was bad. He said over the comm, "I'm sending you the reactor readings. Can we fix this?" There was a pause. "Not in an hour, that thing is dead." "Then we improvise. Can we use our ship's reactor to power their life support?" Another pause, longer this time. "That's insane, Captain. If we link our reactor to their systems and something goes wrong, both ships could explode." "Can you do it?" Laughed, "Give me 15 minutes. What followed was the most stressful 15 minutes of life. Crawled through access tubes, rewiring systems that were never meant to connect. Monitored the power flow, calling out warnings when the levels got too high. Kept the colonists calm, explaining what the humans were doing. The Velar cruiser just watched. They didn't help. They didn't interfere. They just waited to see if the humans would fail. They didn't fail. Completed the connection and fresh air began flowing into the colony. The colonists cheered. Medical teams stabilized the injured. Security squad made sure everyone was accounted for. 6 hours later, a proper coalition repair ship arrived. The colonists were transferred to safety. The Defiance disconnected and resumed its patrol route. There was no thank you from the coalition command. No commendation. Just another report filed and forgotten. But that night, as sat in his quarters, he received a personal message from one of the colonists. It was simple. "Thank you for not giving up on us. You saved 23 lives today." 23 lives. In the grand scale of the galaxy, it was nothing. The coalition had billions of citizens, but to those 23 people, it was everything. Looked out his window at the stars. Humanity had been whispering at the edge of the galaxy for 80 years, trying to prove they belonged. Maybe one day, someone would listen. He had no idea how soon that day would come, or how terrible the price would be. Far beyond the rim, in the darkness between stars, something ancient was stirring. Something that had consumed 1,000 civilizations before the coalition even existed. The Devourers were coming, and the galaxy was not ready. The emergency summit was held on Unity Station, the massive orbital platform that served as the coalition's capital. Had never been there before. Most humans hadn't. The station was reserved for important people, and humanity didn't have many of those yet. But today, everything had changed. The holographic display in the center of the council chamber showed what was left of Era. The fortress world had been home to 16 billion. It had defense shields that could withstand a supernova. It had orbital weapons platforms that could destroy a fleet in minutes. It had never fallen in 4,000 years of warfare. Now it was gone, not destroyed, consumed. The planet's surface was gray and lifeless, stripped of everything valuable. The defense stations were just debris, and somewhere in the darkness, the enemy fleet had vanished as quickly as it appeared. Stood at the back of the chamber with the other human observers. Admiral was the only human allowed to sit at the council table, and even then, she was at the far end, away from the important species. 18 hours, the Velar High Counselor said. His voice was shaking. Era fell in 18 hours. How is this possible? A hologram of the battle played on the display. The Devourers didn't look like ships. They looked like insects, black and segmented, moving in perfect swarms. They had weapons that tore through shields like paper. And worse, they learned. Every tactic they used worked once, maybe twice. Then the Devourers adapted and it never worked again. "We need to evacuate the surrounding sectors," said a counselor. Her species had quantum shields that could phase between dimensions. Even she looked scared. If they attack another core world. If we abandon our worlds, we have already lost, growled a general. We must fight. With what? The Velar counselor spread his hands. We lost 7,000 ships at Era. The Devourers lost perhaps 200, and they have thousands more. The council erupted into argument. Everyone had opinions. No one had solutions. Admiral stood up. She was 54 years old, with gray hair and scars from the colony wars before humanity joined the coalition. She had fought pirates, rebels, and rogue AI, but even she had never seen anything like the Devourers. I have a proposal, she said. The chamber quieted, but not out of respect. The other species looked at her like she was a child interrupting adult conversation. There is a system called Anvil Point, continued. It's a strategic between the outer rim and the core worlds. If the Devourers want to reach the populated sectors, they have to go through Anvil Point. We fortify it. We hold it. We buy time for the evacuation. The Velar counselor studied his data pad. Anvil Point is surrounded by unstable space, sensor interference, gravity fluctuations. It would be difficult to defend. That makes it difficult to attack too, said. How many ships would you need? Asked the counselor. Everything you can spare. The general barked a laugh. You want us to send our entire remaining fleet to defend one system. That's suicide. Not the entire fleet, said quietly. Just enough to hold the line while you evacuate 40 billion civilians from the surrounding sectors. Someone has to stand between the Devourers and those people. And who exactly do you propose sends their ships on this suicide mission? The Velar counselor asked. Looked him directly in the eyes. Humanity will. The chamber went silent, felt his stomach drop. He knew what was coming next. You have 17 ships in your entire fleet, the general said. 17. The Devourers destroyed 7,000 at Era. What exactly do you think you can accomplish? We can hold the line long enough, said. That's all that matters. The council debated for 2 more hours. In the end, they agreed to plan, but only because they had no better options. They authorized her to take 6 ships to Anvil Point, 6 ships to face an enemy that had just destroyed a world. When the summit ended, found in one of the station's observation decks, she was staring out at the stars, her reflection ghostly in the transparent aluminum. Captain, she said without turning around. Admiral, he replied, the Defiance is ready, we'll be one of the 6. She nodded. I know, I was counting on it. We're going to die, aren't we? Was quiet for a long moment. Probably, but those 40 billion civilians won't die, that's the math. The council thinks we'll last an hour, said. The council has underestimated humans before. Finally turned to face him. We're young, 80 years in a coalition that's 12,000 years old. They see us as children, naive, weak. Maybe they're right. Maybe, she agreed. Or maybe we're the only ones crazy enough to do what needs to be done. She handed him a data pad. These are the other 5 ships. The Horizon, the Steadfast, the Mercy, and the Pathfinder. Good ships, good captains. You'll be in command of the tactical group. Looked at the roster. He recognized some of the names. Captain on the Horizon had served with him during the pirate campaigns. Commander Minu on the Steadfast was one of the best strategists in the fleet. He didn't know the others personally, but their records were impressive. What about you? Asked. I'll be coordinating with the evacuation fleets. Someone has to make sure those transports get out safely. She put her hand on his shoulder. I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. The Devourers don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They just consume. But if you can hold them for even a few hours, thousands of ships full of refugees will make it to safety. We'll hold them, said. He didn't know where the confidence came from, but once he said it, he believed it. Back on the Defiance, he called his senior staff together, and the others crowded into the briefing room. laid out the mission. When he finished, no one spoke for a long time. Finally raised her hand. She was the youngest on the crew, barely 22, fresh from the Weapons Training Academy. "Captain, why are we doing this? The Coalition has never done anything for us. They treat us like we don't matter." It was a fair question. Had asked himself the same thing. "Because someone has to," he said, "and we're someone." Nodded. "Besides, imagine the look on those velar faces when we actually pull this off." That got a few laughs, even though everyone knew the odds. They spent the next 6 hours preparing the ship, and his engineering team modified the reactor, setting up systems that would let them push the ship far beyond its normal limits once. Armed every weapon they had, even the old missiles that were supposed to be decommissioned. Stocked the medical bay, though she didn't expect to need much. Either they would survive unharmed or they wouldn't survive at all. Worked on navigation, plotting courses through the unstable space around Anvil Point. She found corridors that the sensors barely detected, paths that would make their small fleet look bigger on enemy scans. The 6 ships met at the edge of Coalition space, looked at them on his 6 small vessels against an entire armada. It should have been terrifying. It was terrifying, but it was also right. "All ships, this is Captain, proceed to Anvil Point, maximum formation." The 6 ships moved together into the darkness. Behind them, the evacuation had begun. Thousands of civilian transports fleeing from the outer colonies, carrying families, children, entire civilizations in their cargo holds. 3 days later, they arrived at Anvil Point. The system was exactly as advertised: unstable, dangerous, perfect for an ambush if you were crazy enough to try it. "Set up defensive positions," ordered. "Activate the false signature generators. Let's make them think we're more than we are." The 6 ships spread out, their reactors broadcasting signals that made them look like 60 ships on long-range sensors. It wouldn't fool the Devourers up close, but it might make them hesitate. They waited. Hours passed, then days. The civilian transports kept flowing through the system, heading for the safe zones in the core worlds. 50,000 transports, 100,000 more. On the 6th day, the sensors screamed. His voice was tight. "Captain, we have incoming. Devourer fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel." "How many?" Checked her readings, checked again. 500 ships, Captain. They brought 500 ships. Looked at his crew. They were scared, he was scared, but no one suggested running. "All ships battle stations," he said. "Today we hold the line." The Devourer armada filled the, blotting out the stars. 500 against 6. The impossible odds. But as watched his crew move to their positions, as he saw the determination on their faces, he realized something. The Coalition had written them off as dead already. They had nothing left to lose, and that made them more dangerous than any army in the galaxy. "Here they come," whispered. The battle for Anvil Point began. The first wave hit them like a hammer. 50 Devourer ships broke from the main fleet and rushed forward. They moved in perfect coordination, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns. The Defiance shook as energy blasts tore through the space around them. "Evasive maneuvers," shouted. "Don't let them predict our movements." His hands flew across the controls. The ship twisted and dove, moving in ways that made no tactical sense. That was the point. The Devourers adapted to patterns, so the humans refused to give them patterns. "Steadfast is taking damage," reported. "Their shields are at 40%. "Tell Minu to fall back behind the debris field," said. "We'll cover him." The 6 human ships moved like they were dancing, each one protecting the others. When the horizon got overwhelmed, the Pathfinder swooped in from above. When the Mercy's weapons overheated, the took its position. They were outnumbered 80-1, but they fought like they were one ship with 6 bodies. "Target that cluster on the left flank," ordered. "Hit them with everything we have." Fingers danced across her weapon's console. Missiles launched, energy beams fired. Even the old kinetic cannons that nobody used anymore roared to life. The Devourer ship started to evade but had anticipated that. She had fired where they would move, not where they were. 3 Devourer ships exploded. 3 more took critical damage and fell back. They're adapting, warned. They're spreading out trying to surround us. Into the asteroid field, said, now. It was an insane move. The asteroid field around Anvil Point was thick with debris and unstable gravity pockets. Most species avoided it because one wrong move meant a collision at high speed, but had spent days studying it, memorizing every rock and every current. She dove the Defiance into the field. The other 5 ships followed. Behind them, the Devourers pursued and immediately started having problems. They were coordinated, but that meant they all made the same mistakes. One ship hit an asteroid and exploded. The debris took out 2 more. They're learning the field, said. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they adapt. Then we use those 5 minutes, said. All ships prepare ambush pattern Delta. It was a tactic they had invented just days ago. The 6 ships split up, hiding behind the largest asteroids. When the Devourers came through, the humans hit them from 6 different directions at once. It was chaos. Beautiful, effective chaos. 10 more Devourer ships died in the ambush, but now the enemy was learning. They started sending scouts ahead, using smaller groups. They were adapting just like at Era. Captain's voice came over the comm from the horizon. We can't keep this up. They're learning too fast. Then we change faster, said. Remember that insane idea you had about using the reactor overflow as a weapon? The one that could blow us up, asked. That's the one, can you do it? There was a pause. Give me 2 minutes. Those were the longest 2 minutes of life. The Defiance took 3 direct hits. Shields dropped to 20%. Hull breaches on deck 3, but they held on. Ready, finally said. But Captain, you're only going to get 1 shot at this. After that, we'll need 30 minutes to reset the reactor, and we'll be completely defenseless. Plot a course straight through the thickest part of their formation, said. When I give the word, release everything. The Defiance accelerated, charging directly at the enemy fleet. The Devourers must have thought the humans were finally breaking, trying to ram them in desperation. They started to surround the ship, moving in for the kill. Now shouted. Dumped the entire reactor overflow into a focused beam. At the same time, fired every weapon they had and ejected their remaining missiles with delayed fuses. The Defiance became a fireball, an explosion of energy that ripped through 20 Devourer ships in one devastating strike. Then the reactor went offline, and they were dead in space. All power to emergency life support, ordered. Seal all blast doors. This is going to get rough. The other 5 ships saw what happened and immediately moved to protect the Defiance. They formed a wall between the crippled ship and the enemy, taking hit after hit. The lost its entire starboard side. The Pathfinder was venting atmosphere, but they held the line. Reactor coming back online, said. 25 minutes, 20. We're not going to make it, Captain. Looked at his crew. Was bleeding from a head wound but still at her station. His arm was broken but she was manually loading torpedo tubes. Was running between stations, treating injuries while the ship fell apart around them. Captain said quietly. Civilian transport convoy Delta just cleared the system. That's the last one. The evacuation is complete. They had done it. 40 billion civilians were safe, but the mission wasn't over. How long have we been fighting? Asked. 14 hours, Captain. 14 hours. They had held Anvil Point for 14 hours against 500 ships. They had destroyed 89 Devourer vessels. 3 of the 6 human ships were still operational, barely. Thousands of humans were dead, but they had held the line. Captain called from the security station. We're being hailed. Coalition frequency. Put it through. Admiral appeared on the screen. Behind her could see hundreds of coalition ships. The fleet had arrived. Captain said, and her voice was thick with emotion, "Hold on, we're coming." Admiral, the evacuation. Complete, every civilian made it out. Thanks to you, she paused. We watched the battle from the staging area. The whole coalition watched. What you did here, nobody thought it was possible. We're not done yet, Admiral. There are still over 400 Devourer ships out there. Then we finish this together, said. All ships engage the enemy. Show them what happens when you threaten the coalition. The coalition fleet poured into the system. Ships from every species, Velar and dozens more. They had come back. They had come back for the humans. The Velar commander who had dismissed at the mining colony opened a channel. Human vessels, fall back and recover. We will take it from here. With respect, Commander said. We've been holding this line for 14 hours. We're not leaving now. There was a pause. Then the Velar said something never expected to hear. Then we will be honored to fight beside you. The combined fleet hit the Devourers like a tidal wave. The battle that followed was brutal. The Devourers were still adapting, still learning, but now they faced hundreds of ships using dozens of different tactics. Every time they learned to counter one species, another attacked from a different angle. And at the center of it all were the 3 surviving human ships, battered, bleeding, but still fighting. The Defiance's reactor came back online, had pushed it past every safety limit, but it was running. Plotted one last course through the enemy formation, armed the few remaining weapons they had. One more run, said, let's make it count. The Defiance dove back into the battle. Around them, coalition ships were pushing the Devourers back. The enemy was retreating now, their formation breaking apart. The perfect coordination was gone. 6 hours later it was over. The Devourer fleet was destroyed or scattered. Anvil Point was secure. The cost had been terrible, over 15,000 coalition personnel dead, hundreds of ships damaged or destroyed. But they had won. Sat in his captain's chair, looking at the aftermath on his. The Mercy was gone, destroyed in the final push. There was crippled beyond repair. The Steadfast, Horizon, Pathfinder, and Defiance had survived, but they looked like wrecks. Captain said softly, we're receiving messages from across the fleet, from every ship, there, thanking us. Pulled up the message queue, hundreds of them, from Velar commanders, soldiers, technicians, all saying the same thing: humanity had stood when others would have fled. Humanity had bought time with blood. Humanity had proven they belonged. Sir, said from security, the Council is requesting Admiral's presence for an emergency session. They want to discuss the Devourer threat and they're asking for human tactical advisors. Smiled, it hurt, everything hurt, but he smiled anyway. They had been a whisper, easy to ignore at the edge of the galaxy. But at Anvil Point, humanity had found its voice, and the galaxy had finally listened. The war was just beginning. The Devourers were still out there, and the force they had just defeated was only a fraction of the enemy's true strength. But now, humanity wouldn't face them alone. Now, they were part of something bigger, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The war changed everything in a matter of weeks. Stood in the briefing room of Coalition Command, surrounded by officers from 24 different species. 6 months ago, no human would have been allowed in this room. Now, Admiral was leading the meeting and was her chief tactical advisor. The Devourers are moving faster than we predicted, said, highlighting 3 star systems on the holographic map. They've hit Outpost Varuna, Colony Threshold, and the shipping lanes near. Different tactics each time. They're testing us. A general leaned forward. How are they learning so quickly? We change our strategies, but within days they've adapted. They're a hive mind, said from her station. She had been promoted to head of weapons research after her work at Anvil Point. Her broken arm had healed, but she still wore the cast as a reminder. They share information instantly across their entire species. What one learns, they all learn. Then how do we fight them? Asked the commander. Stepped up to the map. We make them learn too much. We hit them with so many different tactics so fast that they can't adapt to all of them at once. We overwhelm their ability to process. That's not a strategy, the Velar High Counselor said. That's chaos. Exactly, replied. Chaos is the one thing they can't predict. The counselor looked like he wanted to argue, but Admiral cut him off. Captain, explain your plan. Expanded the map showing the front lines of the war. We create specialized strike teams. Each one uses completely different tactics: ambush, frontal assault, electronic warfare, psychological operations. We keep them guessing. When they adapt to one team, another hits them with something completely different. And you want humans leading these teams? The general asked. Not just leading, teaching. Pulled up training schedules. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've developed tactics for every situation: guerrilla warfare, siege breaking, naval combat, you name it. We can teach the coalition forces to think like we do. There was silence in the room. Finally, the Velar counselor spoke. You're asking us to learn from a species that's been in the coalition for 80 years. I'm asking you to learn from a species that survived, said quietly. The Devourers wiped out Era in 18 hours. We held Anvil Point for 14 hours with 6 ships. That's not because we're stronger or have better technology. It's because we think differently. Another silence. Then Admiral smiled. The Council will vote on this proposal, but Captain, start recruiting your training staff. I have a feeling we're going to need them. Over the next month, assembled a team of human trainers, taught advanced navigation and unpredictable movement patterns, showed coalition engineers how to improvise repairs under fire, trained medical teams in trauma care during active combat. Each human brought something unique. The results were remarkable. Coalition forces that trained with humans started winning battles. Not every battle. The Devourers were still incredibly dangerous, but enough to turn the tide. A squadron used techniques to escape a trap that should have destroyed them. An engineering team saved their ship using one of its improvised fixes. Was inspecting the new training facility on Unity Station when his comm chimed. It was Admiral, and she looked grim. Conference room, now we have a problem. When arrived, he found with and several coalition intelligence officers. The hologram in the center of the room showed a massive structure, a station or ship. It was hard to tell which. This is a Devourer staging ground, said. We found it 3 days ago, deep in uncharted space. Intelligence estimates there are 10,000 Devourer ships gathered there. Felt his blood run cold. 10,000. Everything we've been fighting until now was just scouts, one of the intelligence officers explained. This is their main force. Once they finish gathering, they'll hit the coalition core worlds all at once. We'll lose billions. What are our options? Asked. We evacuate, the Velar counselor said. He had joined the meeting remotely. Pull back to the inner worlds. Abandon the outer colonies. Build defensive positions and hope we can hold. That's not an option, said. That's a death sentence. The Devourers will just consume the outer colonies, grow stronger, and hit us harder. We need to attack them first. Attack, the counselor looked shocked. Admiral, our projections show a 73% chance of total defeat if we engage their main fleet. We'd be throwing away everything we have. If we don't engage them, we have a 100% chance of defeat, said. At least this way, we have a chance. There's another problem, added. She pulled up tactical data. The staging ground is heavily defended. To reach it, we'd need to fight through their perimeter forces first. By the time we got there, the main fleet would be gone. Studied the hologram, turning it slowly in his mind. The staging ground was protected by layers of defense, like a fortress. But fortresses had a weakness. They were designed to keep enemies out, not to deal with enemies already inside. "What if we don't fight through?" he said. "What if we jump directly to the staging ground?" "The calculations for that kind of jump are impossible," said. She had joined the meeting halfway through. "You'd need to know the exact gravitational fields, account for stellar drift, calculate quantum fluctuations. One error and you jump into a star or end up scattered across a light year of space." "But if we could do it," pressed. "If we could jump right into the middle of their staging ground before they knew we were coming. One massive strike. We wouldn't need to fight the defenses. We'd go straight for the heart." Leaned back in her chair. "That's insane." "Yes," agreed, "which is exactly why it might work." Over the next week, worked around the clock with coalition astrophysicists and navigation specialists. The calculations were enormous, millions of variables, each one critical. One mistake would kill everyone. Meanwhile, developed a new weapon. She called it the disruption pulse. It was based on human neural patterns, the chaotic, unpredictable way human minds worked. When broadcast into the Devourer Hive network, it would create interference, break their coordination. "It won't stop them," explained Tu, "but it will confuse them. Give us maybe 30 minutes before they adapt and re-establish connection." 30 minutes, said. "That's all we need." The coalition assembled the largest fleet in its history. Every species contributed ships. The Velar brought their elegant cruisers. The sent their heavy battleships. The contributed their phase ships that could slip between dimensions. Even species that rarely fought sent vessels. And at the center of it all was the human contingent. The Defiance, the Horizon, the Steadfast, and the Pathfinder, the 4 ships that had survived Anvil Point. They had been repaired, upgraded with coalition technology, but they still carried their scars proudly. The night before the attack, walked through the Defiance. His crew was preparing for battle, checking systems, saying quiet goodbyes just in case. He found in the engine room, running one final diagnostic. "How's she looking?" asked. "Like a ship that's been through hell twice and is about to go back for a 3rd time," said. "But she'll hold. We always do." In the medical bay was organizing trauma supplies. She looked up when entered. "Captain, you should get some rest." "Can't sleep," he admitted. "What we're about to do is crazy," finished. "But you know what? 6 months ago they said holding Anvil Point was crazy. We did it anyway." On the bridge was triple-checking her navigation calculations. Sat in the captain's chair beside her. "How confident are you in these numbers?" 85%, said. "Which in galactic navigation terms means we'll probably live. Probably. I've faced worse odds." "That doesn't make me feel better, Captain." The fleet assembled at the jump point. 1,000 ships. Every captain received their orders. This would be a one-way trip. Jump in, strike the staging ground, destroy as many Devourer ships as possible, and try to survive long enough to jump out. Admiral addressed the fleet from her flagship. Her voice was steady, but could hear the weight she carried. She was sending people to their probable deaths. "To all coalition forces," she said, "what we do today will determine the fate of trillions. The Devourers think they have already won. They think we will hide behind our walls and wait for them to consume us. But humanity taught us something at Anvil Point. They taught us that when someone has to stand, when someone has to fight, when someone has to hold the line, we are someone, every one of us. We are the coalition, and we do not yield." Looked at his crew. They were ready, scared but ready. "All ships," ordered. "Jump coordinates locked. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, jump." The fleet vanished from normal space. For one terrifying moment, they existed in the space between spaces, where the rules of physics were suggestions rather than laws. Calculations guided them through the impossible, threading a needle across the galaxy. They emerged directly in the center of the Devourer's staging ground. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The Devourers weren't expecting an attack here, in their own territory. 3 seconds of perfect surprise. Then all hell broke loose. "Broadcast the disruption pulse," ordered. "All ships engage at will." The battle for the Devourer staging ground had begun, and humanity was at the front of it all. The disruption pulse hit the Devourer hive network like a hammer to glass. Across the staging ground, 10,000 enemy ships suddenly lost coordination. They scattered, confused, their perfect formation breaking apart. Some crashed into each other. Others fired on their own vessels. The hive mind that had made them unstoppable was screaming with interference. 30 minutes, shouted over the chaos. That's all we have before they filter out the signal. Open the fleet-wide channel. All ships split into attack groups. Hit them hard and fast. Don't give them time to adapt. The coalition fleet poured through the staging ground like avenging angels. Velar cruisers danced through debris fields, their elegant weapons cutting through Devourer hulls. Battleships rammed forward, their heavy armor turning them into living battering rams. Phase ships flickered in and out of reality, striking from impossible angles. And the human ships fought with the calculated chaos that had become their signature. The Defiance dove toward a cluster of Devourer command vessels. "Get us through that gap," ordered. "I need every bit of power you can give me." "You want power? I'll give you power." His voice came over the comm, slightly manic. The reactor output jumped to 120%, well beyond safe limits. Targeted the command ships with precision strikes. Each hit was calculated to cause maximum damage. When one Devourer vessel exploded, the debris took out 2 others. Nothing was wasted. But the Devourers were adapting. Even through the interference, they were starting to coordinate again. Small groups began working together, forming defensive clusters. 15 minutes, reported. They're starting to filter the pulse. On the Steadfast, Commander Menu had an idea. He opened a channel to all nearby ships. Coalition vessels, pattern Omega-7. We're going to give them too much to process. Pattern Omega-7 was something the humans had developed during training, every ship moving in a different, unpredictable way, but working toward the same goal. It looked like chaos, but it was organized chaos. The Devourers tried to adapt. They shifted their formations to counter one ship, and 3 others would strike from different angles. They learned to defend against kinetic weapons, and energy beams would hit them. They adjusted their shields for one frequency, and a completely different frequency would tear through. Captain called from the security station. "The horizon is in trouble. They're surrounded." Saw it on the tactical display. Captain and her crew were trapped by a dozen Devourer ships, taking damage from all sides. "Get us there, prepare a full spread. We're going to clear them a path." The Defiance accelerated, racing toward the horizon. Ship was smaller than many coalition vessels, but it was fast and it was deadly. They hit the Devourers from behind, missiles and energy beams tearing through their formations. "Horizon, this is Defiance. You have an opening, go." "Thanks for the help," replied her ship, limping away from the trap. "I owe you a drink." "I'll hold you to that." But as turned back to the battle, his heart sank. Through the chaos, he could see the center of the staging ground, a massive structure that had to be the Devourer mothership, and it was moving, preparing to jump away. How long until they completely filter the pulse? 5 minutes, maybe less. If the mothership escaped, the Devourers would regroup. They would return stronger, smarter. Everything they had done here would be for nothing. Made his decision. "All ships, this is Captain. I'm going after the mothership. Cover me." "Captain, that's suicide," said. "That thing is 10 times our size and protected by at least 100 ships." "Then we better be fast." He switched to the command channel. "Admiral, I'm making a run at their mothership. If this works, the whole Devourer fleet will collapse. If it doesn't, we'll make sure your sacrifice means something," said. "Godspeed, Captain." Looked at his crew. This is voluntary. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship. Shut up, Captain, said from the engine room. We're not leaving. Never, agreed from medical. Let's finish this, added, her hands already working on targeting solutions. Just smiled and plotted a course straight through the heart of the enemy fleet. The Defiance accelerated to attack speed. Around them, other coalition ships saw what they were doing and moved to support. The Steadfast and Pathfinder formed up on their flanks. A dozen Velar cruisers created a screen. Battleships bulldozed through the Devourer defenses. Remember your reactor overflow trick from Anvil Point? Asked. The one that nearly killed us. Yeah, I remember. Do it again, but this time we're using it directly on that mothership. Captain, if we get that close and release that much energy, the blast will destroy us too. I know. There was silence on the bridge. Then's voice came back steady and calm. Understood, charging the overflow now. The Defiance tore through the Devourer lines, fired everything they had, clearing a path, dodged incoming fire with maneuvers that seemed impossible. They lost shields. Hull breaches opened on 3 decks, but they kept going. Behind them, the Steadfast took a devastating hit. Commander Minu opened a channel, his ship breaking apart around him. Keep going, finish this. Tell my son the connection cut out. Tears streamed down his face, but his voice was steady. Forward, we keep going forward. They were almost at the mothership when his voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I need to do this manually. The automated systems won't get us close enough. I'm going to have to stay in the engine room when the overflow releases. Understood immediately, couldn't get out in time. No, that's an order, get to an escape pod. With respect, Captain, screw your orders. Laughed, that same slightly manic laugh he always had when things got dangerous. Besides, somebody has to make sure this works, and I'm the best damn engineer in the galaxy. It's been an honor, Captain. Give them hell for me. The Defiance slammed into the side of the mothership. For one moment they were connected, human steel against Devourer chitin. In that moment, broadcast the disruption pulse at maximum strength, directly into the mothership's neural network. The effect was instantaneous. The mothership's connection to the hive mind shattered. Without that coordination, every Devourer ship in the staging ground lost its direction. They stopped adapting. They stopped learning. They were just individual ships, confused and alone. Now shouted, "Fire in the hole! Release the reactor overflow." The explosion was like a newborn star. The mothership was destroyed instantly. The blast wave spread outward, catching dozens of nearby Devourer ships, and on the Defiance disappeared in a flash of light, still laughing. Barely had time to grieve. All hands abandoned ship, get to the escape pods now. Was already pulling him toward the nearest pod. Grabbed, shepherded the crew through smoke-filled corridors. Behind them, the Defiance was breaking apart, torn to pieces by the blast she had helped create. They made it to the pods with seconds to spare. Took one last look at his ship, the vessel that had carried them through Anvil Point, through countless battles, through hell itself. "Thank you," he whispered, and then they were ejecting, pods scattering into space. The battle was over. Without the mothership, the Devourer fleet collapsed. Coalition forces systematically destroyed the leaderless ships or drove them into retreat. Of the 10,000 Devourer vessels, fewer than 1,000 escaped. When the rescue ships arrived, they found and his crew floating in their pods among the wreckage. They had lost. The Steadfast was gone with Commander Minu and his crew. The Pathfinder had taken critical damage and half its crew had died, but they had won. 5 years later, stood at a memorial on Unity Station. It was carved from a piece of the Defiance's hull, twisted and scorched, but still bearing the ship's name. Around it were smaller plaques naming every human who had died in the war. Captain's name was there, along with Commander Minu's and thousands of others. approached wearing the insignia of a captain now. She commanded the UNS Persistence, one of the new human vessels built with coalition technology. "They're starting soon," she said. "You ready?" Nodded. They walked together to the council chamber, where Admiral was about to address the reformed coalition. The old coalition had been dissolved after the war. The new one was built on principles learned from humanity: adaptation, sacrifice, and the understanding that age didn't equal wisdom. Humans now held seats on every major council, led the Weapons Research Division, was the coalition's chief medical officer, commanded an entire battle fleet, and was an admiral now, though he still felt like a captain at heart. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Stood at the podium, older but somehow stronger than before. "Today, we dedicate this memorial to all those who stood on the front lines, to those who refused to whisper when the galaxy needed them to roar." She turned to a massive hologram, the 6 ships that had held Anvil Point, carved in light and immortalized forever. "We were a whisper," said. "Humanity was young, untested, easily dismissed. But when the moment came when someone needed to stand, we chose to be more than a whisper. We chose to roar, not with arrogance, not with anger, but with courage, with sacrifice, with the absolute refusal to let evil triumph while we had breath to fight." The hologram shifted, showing images from the war. In the engine room, Minu on his bridge. Thousands of faces, human and alien, who had stood together. "This memorial isn't just for humans," continued. "It's for everyone who learned what humanity taught us, that it doesn't matter how old you are, how powerful you are, or how advanced your technology is. What matters is what you choose to do when everything is on the line." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "The Devourers thought we would be easy prey. They had consumed 1,000 civilizations before us. But they didn't account for one thing. They didn't account for the species that would rather die standing than live kneeling. That's not human. That's just who we choose to be. And we believe, that it's who all of you choose to be too." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Stood with the other survivors, remembering friends lost, remembering the fear and the courage, remembering the moment humanity stopped being a whisper. Later, as he walked through Unity Station, he passed a group of young cadets, humans, Veiler, all in training together. They saluted him as he passed, and he returned the salute. One of them, a young human named, called out, "Admiral, is it true? Did you really hold Anvil Point with just 6 ships?" Stopped and turned to face them. "We did, but we didn't do it alone. We had each other. We had a purpose. And we had the absolute certainty that someone had to stand, and we were someone." "How were you so brave?" asked the Veeler cadet. Thought about laughing as he died, about Minu's last words, about every human who had faced impossible odds and kept fighting anyway. "We weren't brave," he said. "We were terrified, but we learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite fear. It's standing when you'd rather run. It's being the person who does what needs to be done, even when it costs everything." He looked at each of them. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There will always be threats. But as long as there are people willing to stand on the front lines, willing to be more than whispers when the universe needs them to roar, we'll be okay. As he walked away, he heard the cadets talking excitedly among themselves, already imagining their own futures, and smiled. The next generation wouldn't need to prove themselves the way his had. They would start with respect, with recognition, with a place at the table. But they would carry forward the same lesson, the same choice that had defined humanity's rise from whisper to roar. When someone has to stand, when someone has to fight, when someone has to hold the line, be someone. Always be someone.